Well, it's an interesting issue, and you have to look at where they were and where they are now in terms of their income generation. So we have a very large LNG facility now opening up in the U.S., and the Qataris are a major owner of that. If you look at their investment flow, it's external, not internal. So they are in a position where they can weather this much better than you would have thought with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And that's true as well of the UAE. By intention, both countries have relatively low populations, and they found a way to sustain themselves. And of course, they need as their major source of strategic alliance the United States. Hasn't been fully reliable lately, but there's nowhere else to go. The Saudis are in a very different position. They have invested at home much more than they've invested abroad, particularly in terms of revenue generation, although they've managed to do very well during this crisis. A couple of months ago, they had their highest monthly revenue that they've had in well over a year. Mm-hmm. So a combination of factors there. They didn't invest in production abroad, but they certainly have invested in inventory abroad. And they have had a lot of inventory, maybe not enough, depending on where the war goes to from now. But they've been depleting inventory in the other side of the Suez pipeline on the Mediterranean, in Japan, in China, in Korea, and that has served them extremely well. So they're not as badly off as they might have been several decades ago.
How do we think about the oil, the energy in that part of the world in the Middle East? If I'm Asia, if I'm China broadly, can I depend upon that part of the world like I have in the past, or something fundamentally changed? That strait will never really be open again.
That strait will never again be totally free. In all likelihood, there's some chance that there's an Iranian domestic upheaval, and given the economic situation in the country, they are hurting significantly. Their unemployment was already at 50% before the war began, is up by 2 million more people at least. Their inflation rate is unthinkable. People are not extremely happy. So there could be a revolution, and it could make the strait more secure again, more likely to be secure again. But no, you're right. We also are in a situation where, if you look broadly at the last century was one where, from the beginning, before World War II to sometime in the 1970s, the oil intensity of GDP around the world was growing. Yep. And it reached a peak in around 1973-74, where for every 1% increase in GDP in the world, there was a 1.3% or so increase in oil demand. We've been in a declining oil intensity of GDP. Nowadays, and this is reliable data, you don't have to worry about year-to-year things, for every 1% increase in GDP, there's about a 0.3% increase in oil demand. And I think that what's happened with this crisis since February is that a lot of countries have found ways to accelerate getting off of that oil dependence. But we're in a new environment, a very new environment, and the UAE, Saudi Arabia in particular, are taking advantage of it, and that is we're seeing the electricity intensity of GDP going up. You've had a lot of people on talking about AI and cloud computing. This is extremely electricity intensity, and the Saudis have been extremely lucky. They've got wind, they've got solar, they have battery power, and they have been weaning themselves off. And you can see it in the oil numbers. They use a lot of oil for burning, for power generation, and by 2030 they'll be using none. Now, the peak of it was like 2 years ago, where they were on average using more than 1 million barrels a day of oil for power gen. And now they're going to have that oil, depending what happens with Hormuz, but they have alternative routes to put it in the international market.
When you're sitting at home, you're not doing your usual 60-hour Ed Morse work week. When you're sitting at home watching what we're all watching, except you have this prodigious knowledge of the Persian Gulf and of the oil structure of Iran in oil. What's the number one thing the Trump administration's getting wrong about the resistance and the diligence and the persistence of the Iranian leadership?
Well, I think the number one thing they got wrong, and it's related to that, is relying on their own instincts rather than on the advice of professionals in places like the State Department and the Pentagon. The Pentagon has thought about the Strait of Hormuz for a very long time. We've had since 1980, since the Iranian Revolution, concern about disruption of supply, and they have thought about it in a way that a wishful thinking Trump administration thought that this would be over in a week, didn't think about what would happen if it was more than a week, and didn't think about what the security of the strait were all about. So I'd say it was a little bit based more not on the thinking about Iran, but on the chutzpah of where they were.
I got to ask this. Paul will be angry if I don't ask this. You absolutely nailed lower oil prices versus a large body of Wall Street looking for above $100 a barrel. Given this cacophony, can you continue on a trend of lower oil prices?
Well, yes and no. There definitely is an oil glut that is there and emerging, and you can see it in terms of what countries are doing. And we have to remember that the UAE left OPEC and OPEC Plus in the month of May, and they were producing before this war began and exporting, but producing around 3.2 million barrels a day. They're now producing, or were before this event happened, they were producing over 4 million barrels a day. They claim, and I believe it's true, they have a capacity of close to 5 million barrels a day, and they've announced that they're going to 6 million a day. And they're not alone. We have today the Iraq prime minister arriving in Washington. He announced last week before coming here, in a country that is rich in oil, has multiple ways geographically to export that. They're not going to be necessarily dependent on the strait. They already have a pipeline to Turkey. They're looking at reinstituting pipelines through Syria, through into Jordan, into Israel even. And their goal from a production of 3.5 maybe now to 7 million a day by 2030. So we've got a lot of oil in the world, and I didn't talk about Argentina, the U.S., Guyana, and the like.
Okay, I'm featuring the Rolling Stones' new album all this week on Bloomberg Surveillance. Can I feature you all this week? Can you come back Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday?
I can't manage Tuesday, but I might another day.